In a world overflowing with constant connection, why do so many of us feel so profoundly alone? Why does modern life, with all its comforts, choices, and endless distractions, often feel so painfully empty? Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman called it a liquid society, a world where nothing is built to last, not even our relationships, ambitions, or sense of self. We move faster, reach farther, and connect wider, yet we seem to belong nowhere. In this speech, we dive deep into Bauman's unsettling truth that modern life, for all its glitter, often leaves us rootless, drifting, and hollow inside. If you've ever felt that something crucial is missing, something you can't quite name, you're not imagining it. There are forces at work that slowly dissolve meaning from our lives. The question is, can you recognize them before you're completely swept away? Modern life promises endless possibilities. It offers new experiences, fresh starts, and limitless reinvention. Yet beneath this shiny surface, there is an invisible cost: the erosion of stability and rootedness. In Bauman's concept of a liquid society, nothing holds its shape for long. Careers are no longer lifelong commitments but fleeting contracts. Friendships and relationships, once considered lifelong bonds, are often reduced to temporary alliances, easily replaced when they no longer serve immediate needs. Identities, once forged over years of trial and experience, are now updated like social media profiles to match shifting trends. The result is a profound internal fatigue that creeps into every corner of life. When change becomes the only constant, the human soul struggles to find rest. In the past, communities provided a sense of belonging that anchored the individual to a larger story. Traditions acted like guideposts, helping people navigate uncertainty with a sense of inherited wisdom. Today, those guideposts have been swept away, replaced by the dizzying demand to adapt, to remain flexible, to stay relevant. People are praised not for their steadfastness, but for their ability to reinvent themselves endlessly. This pressure to continually redefine who you are and what you want creates a chronic state of unease, a low-level anxiety that never fully disappears. This endless change strips life of the depth that comes from long-term commitment. Building anything meaningful, whether a relationship, a career, or a personal philosophy, requires time, patience, and perseverance. But in a liquid society where everything must be fast, customizable, and disposable, deep investments of time and emotion are seen as risky or even foolish. Why invest decades into mastering a craft if that craft might become obsolete in a few years? Why invest deeply in a friendship or a marriage when there is always the allure of someone newer, more exciting, more aligned with your current self-image? The culture whispers that it's smarter to stay light, to keep options open, to never tie yourself down. The soul, however, was not designed for constant motion. It craves moments of stillness and places of permanence, where trust can grow, where meaning can accumulate, where depth can form. In a society that discourages these roots from forming, exhaustion becomes inevitable. Restlessness takes over, not the productive kind that leads to creativity, but the hollow kind that leaves you scrolling endlessly, searching for something you cannot name. The exhaustion is not physical, but existential, a tiredness that seeps into identity, purpose, and belonging. Even our relationships are affected by this liquidity. Friendships become fragile, romantic partnerships become conditional, and communities dissolve into loose networks of convenience. The idea of standing by someone through hardship is overshadowed by the easier option of starting over with someone else. In this environment, trust erodes because it depends on the expectation of permanence, an expectation that modern culture steadily undermines. Without trust, relationships become transactional rather than transformational. They meet immediate needs but offer no real sanctuary for the soul. The demand for endless change creates a psychological paradox. People are encouraged to constantly pursue better versions of themselves, yet no version is ever good enough to grant lasting peace. The next goal, the next upgrade, the next achievement always hovers on the horizon, creating a state of perpetual dissatisfaction. This cycle feeds the restlessness, deepening the exhaustion until it becomes a defining feature of modern existence. The soul yearns for a place where it can land, where it can stay and grow. In a liquid society, that place is increasingly hard to find. Instead of feeling liberated by endless options, many feel overwhelmed, alienated, and drained. The constant need to pivot, adapt, and optimize leaves people chasing after a moving target that never stays still long enough to be grasped. Without something solid to build upon, existence feels like floating through a fog, with no landmarks to assure you that you are on the right path. It is this deep, invisible weariness that defines the human experience in Bauman's liquid society. In a time where choices seem endless, one might expect that human happiness would be at its peak. Modern life offers us a buffet of possibilities: careers, relationships, lifestyles, ideologies, all available at the swipe of a finger. Yet instead of feeling empowered, many find themselves paralyzed, dissatisfied, and strangely hollow. The irony of modern abundance is that the more options we are given, the harder it becomes to feel fulfilled. Every decision becomes not a gateway to happiness, but a reminder of what we might be missing. With too many options, the human mind struggles to commit. When every choice carries the weight of infinite alternatives, making a single decision feels riskier. After choosing, doubt creeps in, whispering that perhaps another path would have been better, happier, more successful. This phenomenon, often called the paradox of choice, leads to chronic dissatisfaction, even when our decisions objectively serve us well. In earlier times, life was narrower. The choices were fewer, but within those limits, people often found deeper meaning and satisfaction because they committed fully to the paths available to them. Modern abundance feeds the illusion that perfection is always just one more choice away. This belief breeds a constant state of comparison, with so many curated images of success, beauty, and happiness flashing before our eyes daily. It becomes difficult to feel content with what we have. Even after making a good choice, the presence of other possibilities can cast a shadow of regret. Instead of appreciating what is, the mind fixates on what could have been: the better job we didn't take, the more exciting relationship we didn't pursue, the more adventurous life we didn't live. Satisfaction becomes elusive, always deferred to a future that never quite arrives. This overabundance also dulls the emotional impact of achievements and experiences. When rare experiences become common, their power to move and transform us diminishes. In a world where instant gratification is available 24/7, even deeply meaningful experiences lose their weight. A sense of emptiness starts to creep in. Not because life is lacking, but because it has become saturated with so much that nothing feels truly special anymore. Moments that should inspire awe or gratitude are brushed aside in the rush toward the next thing, the next distraction, the next upgrade. Abundance changes the way we view commitment too. In relationships, for example, knowing there are countless alternatives readily available makes it harder to fully invest in one person. When every slight imperfection can be contrasted against the imagined perfection of someone else, loyalty and patience erode. Rather than building something lasting through time and effort, many choose the easier path of moving on. This prevents the depth and richness that only long-term bonds can offer, leaving a trail of shallow, incomplete connections that fail to nourish the deeper human need for belonging and intimacy. The emotional emptiness bred by abundance is not immediately obvious. It often hides beneath busyness, entertainment, and social validation. People are surrounded by activity, stimulation, and consumption, yet many report feelings of meaninglessness and disconnection. There is an insatiable hunger for more experiences, more validation, more excitement, but each new acquisition only deepens the void. The soul, it seems, was never meant to thrive in endless choice without a corresponding anchor of purpose and commitment. Abundance without direction leads to emotional fragmentation. Choices without meaning become burdens rather than blessings. True satisfaction comes not from having every option available, but from choosing deeply and living fully within that choice. It is the depth of experience, not its breadth, that fills the human heart. In a culture obsessed with maximizing every opportunity, the greatest wealth is often found in learning how to be content with less, but living with more purpose. The tragedy of modern abundance is that it promises freedom but delivers anxiety, offering everything while leaving many feeling as though they have nothing real at all. In the fabric of modern life, the very structures that once anchored human existence have grown fragile. Relationships, careers, and even identity, the pillars upon which people once built a life of meaning, have become fluid, temporary, and subject to constant revision. In this liquid world, the idea of stability is no longer a solid foundation, but an illusion, a fleeting image, that dissolves the moment one tries to grasp it. Relationships, which traditionally provided a sanctuary of trust and belonging, have become increasingly transactional. In a culture obsessed with efficiency and instant gratification, bonds between people are often judged by their immediate utility rather than their depth or resilience. Friendships and partnerships are easily ended at the first sign of discomfort, replaced by new connections that promise novelty without the burden of history or responsibility. Loyalty and perseverance, once valued virtues, are often dismissed as naivety or weakness in a society that prizes flexibility over commitment. Similarly, careers, once a cornerstone of identity and purpose, have lost their solidity. The traditional model of lifelong employment, where individuals dedicated decades to a single profession or company, has largely disappeared. In its place is a gig economy characterized by short-term contracts, freelance projects, and an underlying sense of precariousness. People are encouraged to brand themselves, to adapt endlessly to shifting market demands, to reinvent their professional personas whenever necessary. Security is traded for freedom, but that freedom comes with a heavy price: chronic uncertainty, the erosion of long-term goals, and the anxiety of constant competition. Without the promise of a stable career path, individuals are left to navigate an economic landscape where success feels arbitrary and temporary, and failure feels personal and absolute. Even more deeply, identity itself has become a performance. In a world dominated by social media and constant public exposure, the self is no longer a private, evolving reality, but a curated image designed to attract approval and admiration. People learn to present only the best fragments of their lives, crafting personas that are marketable and pleasing, but often disconnected from their true experiences. Authenticity becomes a liability in a culture where appearances are everything. Identity, once the result of an inward journey towards self-knowledge and acceptance, is now often assembled from external expectations, shifting trends, and the desire to fit in. The pressure to perform not just once, but continuously, across platforms and audiences, creates a relentless cycle of self-surveillance and self-modification. In such an environment, stability is an illusion, because the foundations of life are constantly shifting. Without enduring relationships, consistent careers, or rooted identities, people are left floating, untethered from the deep sources of meaning that once sustained them. Every aspect of existence becomes provisional, subject to change based on convenience, opportunity, or external validation. Trusting in stability becomes a dangerous gamble, one that often ends in disappointment and disillusionment. Modern individuals are taught to be resilient, not by building stronger roots, but by preparing to lose them at any moment. This instability seeps into the psyche, creating a pervasive sense of restlessness and insecurity. People may appear to have freedom and endless opportunity, but internally they wrestle with loneliness, fear, and a profound sense of impermanence. Achievements, relationships, and even personal growth feel fragile, always on the brink of collapse, under the weight of changing circumstances or shifting social currents. Stability, rather than being a shared societal goal, becomes a private battle fought silently and often unsuccessfully by individuals trying to carve out islands of meaning in a sea of constant flux. The illusion of stability is perhaps the cruelest trick of modernity, offering the appearance of solid ground, while pulling it away the moment one tries to step firmly onto it. It teaches people to seek security in places that cannot hold them, to invest deeply in structures designed to fall apart. In the end, navigating a world where everything can be discarded, replaced, or reinvented requires a different kind of strength. Not the strength to hold on to stability, but the strength to find meaning and identity, even when the ground is always shifting beneath one's feet. Freedom is often hailed as the ultimate goal of human existence, the pinnacle of modern civilization. The ability to choose, to move, to define one's own path is seen as the key to personal fulfillment. Yet, when freedom exists without a deeper framework of meaning, it becomes a double-edged sword. Without an anchoring purpose, freedom does not liberate, it burdens. Instead of creating joy, it fosters anxiety, uncertainty, and an invisible despair that quietly corrodes the soul from within. Freedom detached from meaning offers infinite possibilities, but no clear reason to pursue any of them. It invites endless questioning without providing satisfying answers. When individuals are told they can be anything, achieve anything, and believe anything, they are also left with the heavy responsibility of creating significance out of a chaotic sea of options. In the absence of a guiding purpose, every choice feels arbitrary, and every path seems equally hollow. This overwhelming freedom places the entire burden of meaning on the individual's shoulders. Traditional structures that once provided a sense of belonging, family, religion, community, have weakened or disappeared altogether. Left to their own devices, people must construct their own identities, morals, and purposes. While this sounds empowering, it often leads to internal fragmentation. People drift from one passion to another, one belief system to another, searching desperately for something that feels real and lasting. In many cases, the search itself becomes exhausting, leading not to enlightenment, but to cynicism and existential fatigue. When nothing outside oneself offers enduring meaning, life can feel like a series of disconnected episodes, interesting perhaps, but lacking a cohesive story. The anxiety generated by this condition is subtle but pervasive. It manifests in the fear of missing out, the endless second-guessing of decisions, and the chronic dissatisfaction with the present moment. When freedom is unlimited and unanchored, every choice feels monumental, because each decision seems to shape an identity that is otherwise fluid and undefined. This immense pressure often paralyzes rather than empowers. People become afraid to commit, fearing that any commitment might close off other potential identities or futures. The fear of choosing wrong overshadows the joy of choosing at all, leaving individuals trapped in cycles of indecision and regret. Freedom, without deeper meaning, often leads to a quiet, creeping despair, because human beings are wired for purpose. Without a sense of contribution to something larger than oneself, even the most pleasurable experiences lose their flavor over time. Hedonistic pursuits, while momentarily satisfying, eventually reveal their emptiness. The chase for wealth, status, experiences, and validation becomes a hollow ritual, repeated out of habit, rather than genuine desire. People find themselves living lives that look successful from the outside but feel profoundly barren from within. They may achieve everything they thought they wanted and yet feel haunted by a sense that something vital is missing. This quiet despair is difficult to articulate, because on the surface, there is no obvious tragedy. Material needs are often met, opportunities abound, and yet an invisible weight presses down on the spirit. It is the despair of realizing that freedom in itself is not enough. It needs to be tied to a deeper mission, a calling, or a set of values that give life texture and direction. Without this anchor, freedom becomes a vast, open sea with no stars to navigate by, leaving the individual drifting aimlessly, vulnerable to the storms of doubt and meaninglessness. The promise of freedom is fulfilled, not in the absence of constraints, but in the presence of worthy commitments. It is only when people bind themselves to purposes larger than their immediate gratification that freedom finds its true expression. Meaning gives shape to freedom, turning random movement into purposeful progress. Without it, freedom remains a beautiful but empty shell, and the human heart, made for more than mere choice, slowly withers under the weight of its own unfulfilled potential. Modern life dazzles with endless options, constant entertainment, and the promise of unlimited freedom. Yet, beneath the glittering surface, a growing emptiness persists. People chase distractions, accumulate possessions, and connect digitally, but still feel an aching void at their core. This hollowness is not an accident. It is the inevitable result of a society that glorifies individualism while eroding the foundations that once gave life depth and coherence. Escaping this pervasive emptiness demands a conscious effort to rebuild commitment, rediscover meaning, and foster genuine human connection, even as the world subtly or overtly resists these efforts. Commitment today is viewed almost as a burden rather than a virtue. In an age where everything is designed to be replaceable, from products to relationships, the idea of staying loyal to anything seems outdated. Yet, without commitment, life lacks gravity. Commitment provides an anchor, a sense of purpose that persists even through adversity. It demands the sacrifice of other possibilities, but offers in return the richness of deep engagement and the fulfillment that only perseverance can yield. Committing to a person, a vocation, a set of values or a cause requires enduring discomfort and overcoming the inevitable hardships that arise. It is through commitment that individuals move beyond surface-level existence and begin to construct lives of real substance. Meaning, too, is not something that can be passively consumed. It must be actively created. In a society driven by consumerism, people are constantly sold substitutes for meaning, status symbols, fleeting pleasures, virtual admiration. But these do not satisfy the soul's deeper hunger. True meaning emerges from the pursuit of something greater than oneself, something that aligns with inner values and resonates across time. It often involves struggle, sacrifice, and patience. Meaning is found in raising a family, building a community, dedicating oneself to craftsmanship, creating beauty, seeking truth, or serving others. These endeavors require stepping outside the self-centered narratives that dominate modern culture and investing energy into pursuits that may not yield immediate gratification, but offer profound, lasting fulfillment. Human connection, perhaps the most threatened treasure in modern life, demands more than just proximity or communication. It requires vulnerability, authenticity, and a willingness to remain present with others, even when it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. The world of curated personas and surface-level interactions encourages a type of loneliness where people are surrounded by others, but feel profoundly alone. Genuine connection arises from shared experiences, from the willingness to be seen in one's imperfections, and from the dedication to nurture bonds over time. It cannot be mass-produced or hurried. In fact, the very forces that dominate modern life, speed, efficiency, image management, are hostile to the slow and messy work that real relationships demand. To rebuild connection is to push against the tide, choosing depth over breadth, quality over quantity. The modern environment does not make this easy. It prizes mobility over roots, novelty over tradition, and personal gratification over communal responsibility. To rebuild what has been lost is to consciously resist these pressures, to live deliberately rather than reactively. It is to recognize that meaning does not arise spontaneously out of freedom or abundance. It grows slowly out of dedication, sacrifice, and shared life. The world will always offer easier paths of distraction, detachment, and shallow satisfaction, but these paths only deepen the sense of hollowness over time. Rebuilding commitment, meaning, and human connection is not a one-time act but a way of living. It demands daily choices to value depth over convenience, to seek truth over comfort, and to invest in relationships even when they are imperfect and difficult. It requires patience with oneself and others, the humility to recognize one's own need for belonging, and the courage to offer that belonging to others. In a world that subtly erodes these efforts at every turn, the act of rebuilding becomes a quiet revolution, a way of reclaiming one's humanity from the forces that would reduce life to mere existence. In a world that promises everything, yet often leaves us feeling nothing, the quiet courage to rebuild commitment, rediscover meaning, and nurture real connection becomes an act of true rebellion. Modern life offers infinite choices, but little fulfillment, endless movement but no true direction. It tempts us with surface-level pleasures while hollowing out the depth of our existence. Yet, within this noise and chaos, there remains a choice to live deliberately, rather than drift aimlessly. Escaping the emptiness of modernity is not about abandoning the world, but about moving through it with an anchored heart and a steadfast spirit. It is about finding stillness in change, loyalty in a culture of disposability, and authenticity in a sea of performance. The work is slow, often invisible, and sometimes painful, but it is the only path that leads to a life that feels real, a life that resonates, not just impresses. The call to rebuild is not a call for perfection, but for perseverance. It is an invitation to plant roots where others only skim the surface, to commit to people and purposes that outlast the moment, and to forge bonds that withstand the shifting tides of a restless world. In doing so, we reclaim not only our own souls, but the possibility of a richer, deeper human experience. In a liquid society that constantly pushes us toward emptiness, choosing depth is an act of strength. Choosing meaning is an act of defiance. Choosing connection is an act of hope. And in the end, it is these quiet choices, made over and over again, that transform a hollow existence into a life of profound, unshakable substance.